Welcome, everyone. It's 3 o'clock, and we are going to get started with our webinar today. I want to thank everyone for coming and attending. We're going to have a really exciting conversation about what does it look like when a district moves the needle for chronic absenteeism. Um, we have a chat active at the bottom for participants. Please feel free to put any questions in there. Myself and my team will take a look at those questions, and we will either answer those or share them with our panel as we move along. I do want to take a moment and introduce to you all our three panelists for our webinar today. First is Joe Filio, our CEO at Hedy. We have Hedy Chang, the CEO and founder of Attendance Works. And Hedy, if you want to introduce yourself a little.
Hi, thank you so much, Daniel. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm CEO and founder of Attendance Works. We are a national initiative aimed at helping make sure that kids can succeed in school and thrive in life by making sure they're showing up to school every day. As a goal, we're actually trying to make sure that as a country, we reduce chronic absence by 50% from its pre-pandemic highs. And we do that by trying to make sure that folks have access to the resources and tools that they need and make sure they don't have to reinvent the wheel. So our website is where you can find a lot of the information.
Thank you so much, Hedy. We're excited that you're here with us today. And we've also got joining us Dr. Chris Jones from Farmington Municipal Schools, who's a district that has worked to improve chronic absenteeism along with us here at Hedy. Chris, if you would.
Sure, yeah. My name's Chris Jones. Thanks for having me on today. Excited to share some work we've been doing around attendance. Just a quick background on me. This is my 14th year in education. 6 of those years spent as a school administrator, either an assistant principal or principal at the middle school level, and then prior to that, as a history teacher. So I've definitely been in this district the whole time and have some really great stories of success here in Farmington that I'm excited to share. So
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Jones. And so we're going to start off this webinar with learning the groundwork nationally from Hedy Chang, talking about her work with Attendance Works and the tackling the problem of chronic absenteeism across the country. And so, Hedy, I will let you take it away from here.
All right. Thanks so much. So let me just go through a couple key concepts to make sure we're all on the same page. And if you go to the next slide, Daniel, I just want to make sure that people know there are a lot of attendance terms, actually. And the ones that when I first started the work were most commonly used was average daily attendance, which typically tells you how many kids show up every day. And in some places, about 6, 7 states, it was used for funding. Truancy, which is unexcused absences. In a lot of ways, that's how we've thought about attendance for the longest time, kind of assuming that kids aren't showing up because somehow they're not prioritizing school enough. And a lot of times, truancy, um, uh, if you are having too many unexcused absences, you'd eventually resort to using more legal, typically a little bit more punitive strategies. And we've had that in place for a long time as a country. The new metric that we started to promote 20 years ago, I started research on this. At that time, we had paper and pencil attendance. So we weren't calculating at 2010. We finally had electronic student data systems, so we could use our data to actually notice who's missing too much school for any reason. And we found that at 10%, if you counted all absences, you kind of start to see that actually predicts worse outcomes. That's just 2 days in the first month, 4 days in the second month, 6 days in the third month. And when we start using chronic absence to identify kids and groups of kids, it allows us to use more prevention, problem solving, trauma sensitive strategies that use family and student engagement to get kids in school. We really didn't get a good chronic absence data for the country until about the year before the pandemic. And if you go to the next slide, this is one thing that I'm really happy with. This was just a hidden crisis that no one knew about. And it was 1 out of 6 kids before the pandemic, but then during the pandemic, it went to closer to 1 out of 3. Incredibly high levels. And unfortunately, it's still not coming back. It's still not back to what it was before. It's still closer to 1 out of 4 kids. So that's really a challenge. And if you go to the next slide, you can see that chronic absence, this is one of the things we did. We've catalyzed a whole bunch of research that we now know it affects kids at every level. If you aren't showing up to school regularly starting in pre-K and K, it reduces the likelihood that you're reading at the end of third grade, you're struggling with achievement, maybe even suspensions in middle school, and you're much less likely to drop out to high school. And it's not just the academic challenges, it's affecting your educational engagement, your social emotional development, even connected to worse and lower executive functioning. And if you go to the next slide, um, part of what we were trying to move away is from sort of blame, a punitive approach to saying, the key to improving attendance is understanding what causes kids to miss school in the first place. Is it barriers? Is it aversion? Is it disengagement? Is it misconceptions? And these are buckets that were there before the pandemic. Um, but these buckets still hold true now, but we know different things about these. And actually, this is something that every school and community needs to unpack for themselves. I will say, though, there are some patterns you can see where high poverty schools are much more likely to have kids facing the things in the barrier section, right? But anxiety, for example, not connecting to adults or peers in schools, that is something that we've still had a hard time returning to from the pandemic. And then misconceptions where kids and families might not realize that just missing 2 days a month, that was true before the pandemic, but post-pandemic, when people think, oh, I can just make it up for it out online, or they've now been trained to stay home for any symptom of illness, when sometimes actually stomach aches or anxiety. So coming up with solutions really requires that we dig into and understand what's causing this so that we can then come up with, whether it's an individual or if it's lots of kids, a programmatic intervention or policy intervention so that we change these root causes. And if you go to the next slide, what we know is that it really requires us moving from blame to partnership, going from problem to partner to outreach, from one-way messaging to listening to kids and families, from focusing only on barriers to leveraging student and family strengths, to going from presuming we know all the answers to collaborating with students and families to encourage practices that build upon their assets and priorities. And it's when we engage in this kind of partnership that we can actually improve attendance because then we both motivate kids and families to show up, but we can actually solve the underlying challenges that they're facing that are keeping kids from being in school. And if you go to the next slide, um, some of this is also looking at when we communicate with families, do we actually have to change the way we speak to them? This is actually an example from California. So pre-pandemic, we actually were able to put in place, well, check out, we had an assumption that, because in California in the past, we were actually required by law, schools were required by law to say, you've missed this much school, and if you continue missing this much school, we may have to take you to court. That is not a partnership-focused approach. So we tested out with Harvard if we created a different kind of messaging. And because it was required, we still put the old messaging, but shrunk it. So it was kind of barely legible, but instead had, really easy to understand language that said, hey, do your kid miss these days? We're worried about you. How can we help? Turns out that kinder, more easy to understand, less punitive language got you 40% better attendance. Next slide. So this is really about recognizing that when you have high levels of chronic absence, um, you got to look at the underlying conditions that are in schools to see whether or not we need to improve them to make sure that kids feel school's a place they want to be. And kids want to be in school when schools feel physically and emotionally healthy and safe, when kids sense a sense of belonging, connection, support, when they feel academic challenge and engagement, when they're surrounded by adults and students who can form those relationships to get them back to school. And so we need to make sure schools have that in place. And we notice if beyond this, there are issues that are happening in the community that prevent kids from getting to school and experiencing these conditions. And if you go to the next slide, that's why you have to have a tiered approach that starts by building on those positive conditions and then uses prevention-oriented strategies that are available to all kids. Um, making kids know that they're noticed when they don't show up to school, making sure if there's a common challenge like uh, lack of a safe path to school for lots of kids, then you might have to be investing in that. And then when kids for whom those basic supports aren't enough, you might need to do more tier two mentoring, additional supports, and then tier three, which often require more interagency partnerships to address the complex set of barriers that kids and families may face. And if you go to the next slide, this is really putting this in place means you have to have school teams that can make sure those tiers of intervention are in place, and that you're aligning them to root causes, and you're making sure that kids who need extra support get it, and you're supporting it with a district team that can make sure that it's easy for schools to have data, easy to understand the kinds of supports and resources that they can put in place and get to kids. And then if you go to the next slide, oops, I guess we're missing one of our slides disappeared. I thought, oh, well, we have one on key ingredients of change, which are about having actionable data, positive engagement. Not sure where that slide went, but we'll make sure that when it goes out, Dan will just add it back in. But it's really making sure that districts are equipped to support all these things and have them in place in schools. And then the last thing I just say, if anyone has any other questions, they can always contact us here. So let me take it back to you, Daniel.
All right. Well, back with you, Hedy. I've got a couple questions. I'm keeping an eye on the chat, but it sounds like it's really important that schools and school systems are making that transition from just communicating absences and looking, creating kind of punitive relationships with the families to building trust-based relationships with families in their community. When you see districts make that transformation, what are some of those key ingredients? Even though we don't have the slide, I'd still love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and actually, if you go back up to that slide that talks about going from punitive kind of blame to partnership,
Mhm.
uh, I think this helps you see some of those things. So, an example of this is if you know um, uh, at the beginning of a school year, every kid is reached out to by their teacher just to call home. Hey, how you doing, Dan? I just wanted to make sure you know I'm your teacher. If you have any questions, come get me. You can also, if you wanted to make that more intensive, know all the kids who were chronically absent the prior year, and you make sure that those kids get an even extra friendlier outreach. Maybe even doing a visit if you have the resources so that you're building a connection. Um, it makes sure that when you're visiting them, you're not starting off by saying, like, let's say you have a kid who you knew was chronically absent the prior year. You wouldn't go in and say, hey, I'm contacting you because I noticed you had poor attendance last year. That's just going to turn a kid off. You might go to the family and say, hey, I'm so excited you're here. What excites you about the school year? How can we help make sure this year is a good one for you? And then later on, if you've built up a relationship, you're not just focusing on barriers. I'm saying, hey, Daniel, one of the things I notice is that you are really good with your hands. I've seen you construct. How did you do that? What do you build on that? Or I notice that you're really good about connecting to other kids and being empathetic. And then you're talking to kids and families about how do you build on that strength and make school even more of a place that they want to be.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit more on that. And I think that comes through a lot in this presentation of not being punitive and being focused on those relationships. I think that's something that a lot of school districts struggle with is the resources for that. What are some smart ways you've seen districts think about how they allocate resources for whether it's time or if a student has barriers they can help overcome? Because I know that is a challenge for a lot of districts.
And you know what? We can take up, I think this slide, why don't we just not show I'm
Go
sorry. I think my contact information isn't the most exciting thing to see. So how do you, it's how do you help districts restate that? Doing a just restate that for a second for me.
A lot of districts have trouble with deciding how to allocate their resources or which problems to focus on. Where have you seen districts be successful with that? And Joe or Dr. Jones, please feel free to chime in that too. I know we've spoken with a lot of people.
So what I would say, part of the challenge we have is we have initiatives that are and could be connected, and we're not connecting them. So let me give an example. We know that expanded learning programs, after school programs, can actually have a real impact on kids' attendance. But we don't always leverage that. So let's say you have an expanded learning program, is that you um, you would make sure that kids who are having struggles with attendance are actually being reached out to come and be part of that expanded learning program. You're making sure that the staff in an expanded learning program would know that a child was having challenges and make sure that they can be part of the outreach. We should be thinking about what are outcomes that are interconnected, and we can work across departments to achieve those goals. And then I saw I think Angela Crespin might have been. Um, she's talking about using EDIA as one of those examples too.
Yeah,
But I do think that we need to think about what are the things that we already do. So another example, if you want to create school as an engaging um, place to be that you know that kids feel connected to, do you watch how when kids walk into the classroom, what happens? Are they greeted? Do adults notice them? Do you have maybe greetings by positive greetings at the door? Kids are gonna walk into the classroom in some way, but are you leveraging that opportunity to make kids feel engaged and connected and creating those relationships that then allow us, a teacher, for example, if the kid started missing to school, to actually be able to have a positive connection with a kid and have a meaningful conversation about a more difficult topic?
wonderful. And that connection is really important. I think that Dr. Jones, we're going to move to you to hear a little bit about Farmington. I'm going to pull this slide up. So folks that are not familiar with Farmington, if you could start by sharing with the district, you can talk a little bit more about your role. And then if you could speak to some of the attendance challenges that you all faced before your partnership with EDIA.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. I just had to find the mute button there. So yeah, in Farmington Schools, my role currently is the Director of Support Services. So I get the opportunity to work with schools directly with principals, attendance liaisons, secretaries around school culture, attendance, and behavior, which are all very much interrelated, right? We know that students experience suspension or are more likely to experience absenteeism. Absenteeism can also lead to academic troubles as well as behavior, types of things. And we all know that school culture, students having that sense of belonging can really increase their ability to come to school. So I think it all kind of works together. And then, I'll kind of get into how, EDIA helps serve some of that and what the work I do with the schools. But yeah, a little background on Farmington. Really fortunate to live in a very diverse community, man. We have so many wonderful things that people can do here. So many different families represented culturally. It's really cool. So you can see there on the map, you got Farmington there, the little Four Corners area. So yes, at one time you can stand in four different states. So it always makes a fun, picture to the in-laws. Like, I don't know where your kid is. She's in a different state. I thought that was a funny text message. Maybe not everybody else did, but but yeah, you definitely can do that here, which really brings to light how diverse this area is, right? We serve so many different communities. Like the slide says, there are 24 different languages, right? So, different tribes and nations, our population very diverse, which is wonderful, right? Because we can learn and draw from each other in this area. That also creates some challenges, though, too, right? Along with language barriers, those types of things. Like when you go to reach out to a family, how can you make that connection if we're without kind of the breakthrough or breakdown in language barriers and things like that, which some of the stuff in EDIA really helps, right? Because whatever language a family texts in, that's what it comes back and forth to that family, right? So it really helps kind of create some two-way communication. We're a decently large size district, serving around 10,000 students. There's some larger districts down south, but for this area, we're the largest district in the area. And because of that, we offer a lot of great programs and a lot of great teachers here. And so we get kids from the surrounding areas that come here as well, right? And so it creates a great diverse culture for us.
Great. And Dr. Jones, could you talk a little bit more about the barriers that you were facing? This is like Hedy shared that this is a challenge districts have been facing for a while, even before COVID. What did attendance look like? What kind of problems were on your radar, and what kind of goals did you have before you partnered with EDIA?
Yeah, so prior to EDIA coming on, I was serving as a principal here in Farmington schools. And how we would handle attendance is that if a student showed up as absent on Power School, it would do a robocall to that family through Power School messaging saying your son or daughter was absent for X amount of time today, right? And that was it. It was a one-way type thing. The return on that phone call very, very low, right? Like we just put it in there and then the attendance would just get coded as absent, and we didn't really have a vision into why or what that absence was about. And so then when I started in this role, it was a kind of our second year with EDIA. The first year piloted at the large high schools, and then last year went to our whole district. And so now when a student is absent, that text goes out right away, right? It goes straight to the family. Parent opens that up and says, "Hey, notice your son or daughter was absent today. Can you give us a reason?" Parent can say just a quick text message. I mean, I've done this for myself, right? I take a screenshot of my kiddo's doctor's note and say, "Hey, we're homesick today." That goes back to the school, and the school's like, it just automatically codes that into our assist, doctor verified. It still counts as an absence, but we know at least a little bit as to why. Um, but really, prior to that, it would take a secretary going in there, listening to all the voice messages back and forth, trying to go through and code things. Very time consuming. So it really limited the amount of time that we could individually support students. And so now with EDIA, if it gets flagged as something concerning, it automatically flags it in the system, and then it goes kind of that flow of workflow to the school. They can make a phone call home and say, "Hey, I noticed that you put in here that your family, doesn't have a place to stay. We have a resource to help you connect with people in the community to get you some, you know, uh, secure housing, right? Like in those types of things." And so it creates a much quicker dialogue between us and families, and also creates a much better vision into what's happening for our kids and how we can support them.
All right. So it sounds like you're meeting a lot of the goals that we built for. And I'm going to transition to Joe here to talk a little bit about EDIA. But I appreciate you sharing how you were getting messages to families before and the difference that's made. And then also that pointing out that that is a really time consuming task for districts as well. Joe, I'm going to go to our EDIA slides here just to talk a little bit about how we facilitate that communication.
Yeah, sure. And for everyone, it's great to have everyone here. And we've been so fortunate to work with Hedy and Dr. Jones and the Farmington team, and all across the country now support about 1 million students across the U.S. for our different products. About 2.5 years ago, Hedy and I were discussing attendance, and I was telling her about this, different concept we had to try to make an improvement on chronic absenteeism. And since then, it's really become by far the number one AI attendance solution in the country. And it's very exciting. But to be able to support the districts. I mean, as Hedy really well articulated, just attendance is core to success, for students, and chronic absenteeism, has all these major downstream implications as kids grow up. The And I think you see it, across different communities, at Farmington, as Chris was saying, they're very diverse communities, such a large area, to go manage. All these different things happen that prevent kids from coming to school or change the culture. And it becomes this very big problem of how do you even understand what's going on? Why are kids not showing up? And then how do you actually go and kind of systematically change that, go from 30% chronically absent down to 25, down to 20, kind of just make that improvement until you're really happy with the outcomes. So anyways, I guess just, about EDIA, we've now been Like I said, we support about 1 million students across the US. And really, the problem we help districts solve is understanding why students are not showing up for school, and then working and addressing those root causes. And before EDIA, as kind of as Dr. Jones was saying, a lot of the efforts to reach out to families to understand things were through robocalls, or one-way text messaging, where if a student missed school, at the end of the day, they get a robocall from the parent. And EDIA kind of flips that whole model where you don't wait to the end of the day. It's within minutes of an absence. EDIA reaches out to the family, and has a two-way AI-driven conversation with the family. And so, and it's all on behalf of the district. It's powerful in that it can go reach out. And if you're at Farmington, they have some large high schools, 2,000 plus kid high schools. You think about that on any given day, you might have 200 kids who are absent, and for a staff member to go reach out to 200 families, in minutes of absence and say, "Hey, where's your child?" I mean, we'd all love for that to happen. That's the dream, but you don't have 5 staff who can just call families, in real time that day. And so what ED does is allows AI to go do that. And so we have that AI conversation with the parent to understand why kids aren't showing up for school. And from there, we understand those root causes and really reallocate staff time to then go addressing them and solving them. And it's been really, really successful and really productive. And yeah, Dr. Jones can probably share some of the things their teams has uncovered and how it's changed their workflow at Farmington too.
Yeah, I definitely happy to share some of those highlights for us. And it may come on another slide, but just last year is estimated to save about 6,000 hours of work time for our schools. And so to me, it's like, you hear AI and you think it's, the unpersonal piece to that, right? But saving that time allowed for the human element to really get engaged with families, and support families. And, I've seen examples in our schools where, family keeps messaging, my kid has, this medical issue, right? Which is what we discovered is one of our larger reasons for absenteeism. But that gives the school an opportunity to call them and say, "Hey, notice this is going on. Maybe we need to set up a 504. Maybe there's another route to how we can support you here at the school, right? Like maybe we need to do some homebound services, making sure that they get the help that they need." And so there's some things that we've uncovered a little bit. Or another one, right? We know that wanting kids to feel welcome at school. We know that bullying is something we definitely take very serious, but it's also something we'd be kidding ourselves if we didn't admit that some of that does happen, right? So in a family, they're probably a little more apt to just text that because it's a little more comfortable. But then a school can get a hold of that and then call that family really quickly and say, "Hey, notice your son missed school today or daughter because of an issue on the bus. Why don't we come in and talk about it?" Right? As opposed to days and days and days down the road of absenteeism. And then the teacher going, "You know what? My student has been here in a week. Maybe I'll call." So much more quicker to get onto that, right? So it's kind of removing some of those barriers, and allowing us to help families a lot quicker.
That speed, I think, is really important, especially going back to what Hedy shared about shifting the conversation from punitive to supportive. Dr. Jones, have you seen it make a difference to families and how they respond when you bring up an issue quickly as compared to bringing it up in a letter, maybe 5 or 7 absences in?
Oh, absolutely, right? Like, just like Hedy said earlier, this move towards, a positivity involvement helping as opposed to being very punitive, and our Attendance for Success Act here in New Mexico outlines that very clearly that we're not to be punitive. And I think just the feeling of a quick text message or responding quickly as opposed to like that 10-day letter, is so much more engaging for our families, right? I get the phone calls here in my office, right? If it's not a positive interaction for sure. And so, but that being said, the ability to communicate quickly and often just creates so much more of a, I don't know, a dialogue, right? And breaks down those barriers. The first time they hear from a school is not at parent teacher conference night. It's not at at this official meeting where you've got all the admin at the school with the family. It's early, right? You're communicating along the way. No one likes to be blindsided, and I think that's what's really helpful about that. Even if it is just the AI text message back and forth, they do still get that communication back and forth along the way. There's no surprises, which as a parent myself in the school district, I appreciate that.
Yeah. I want to ask a little bit about your parent experience too, Dr. Jones. You shared that you've used it as a parent. From that perspective, how does it feel to get that text message to be able to upload that doctor's note? Um, what are your thoughts there?
It's so much easier, right? I can be sitting in the doctor's office and just take care of it right here. I don't have to remember to, call the school and say, "Hey, we're out because we're sick." It takes place, right? Another thing though, as my kids get a little older, and I've heard some other parents in their district here that, have kids at the high school level, where they're going back and forth to different classes, maybe an off-campus work study or something like that. Um, you know, possibly they're going to the Kate Center for some career tech travel back and forth. If a kid is absent that period, they're going to text message that period. So then the parent can call their kiddo and say, "Hey, where are you?" "Oh, well, this happened. Oh, whatever it may be." But it's so much more real time for families. And I think in a way, kind of helps with some safety stuff too, right? As our kids are in the upper grades and traveling and driving themselves and just making sure our kids are where they're supposed to be. So it's been helpful in that. I've heard some parents in our district talk about that too. So
Yeah. I think that one of my favorite quotes that I've heard is that it's like texting your friends to plan dinner, easy to do. But here's some other metrics that are shared from Farmington, Chris. I mean, if you want to talk a little bit just about the impact of these, we see a huge amount of personalized messages, big increase in response time. Which of these stand out to you as impacting your team's work the most?
I think for me, it's that, 11 times the family response rate of a robocall. I mean, that just shows how ineffective robocalls are, right? Like, but it's also prior to this, probably our easiest form of communication, right? As the principal, I would send robocalls because it's easy, right? But it's not personal, it's not two-way. And so to me, that one really sticks out because it shows that we're connecting with families, as opposed to just a push out. It's really can be two-way. And then the personalized messages obviously have a huge help in that too. But yeah, for me, that's the big one. It, we talked about, you look at the 6,000 excuse documents, that's a lot of work for somebody in our schools. And really that's my job, right? Is to support schools to alleviate barriers so that they can do the work that they need to do. And that's evidence of one of those for sure.
Eddie, I'm curious when you work with teams across the country too, where do you find you know, time sucks for the teams or things that they want to do. There's always the pyramid that's stuck in my head, things they want to do and they can't get around to, or what do you typically see there?
I think you're muted, Hedy.
Unmuting would help. You didn't hear my brilliant response. Um,
Please
uh,
tell us again.
so I do think one of the things, because we come from this truancy system, there's a lot of mandating about that you have to communicate with families. But the mandating tends to be one-way communications when what you really want is two-way communications, right? So you can have staff who are then mandated either by sending letters, and sometimes the letters aren't so helpful. But so making it easier for staff to communicate with families in a two-way kind of way, or the school district. So I can see where that benefit of having of staff not having to call is a real huge thing that could save then people's time so that they're involved in problem solving, not required notification or one-way communications. The other thing I did wonder about, and this connects to, I actually have a question for Chris, is I think when we either do that, a lot of times one of our challenges is how do we actually use our information to figure out common causes of absence? And our codes for attendance don't often, everyone says my kid was sick because that gets an excused absence, and then I'm not going to be in trouble and get in trouble with the law. But that doesn't actually help me understand why kids really miss our school. Like, even if you took illness, is illness because the kid had a chronic illness? Is the kid had an acute illness? Did the kid have a stomach ache? And so it might actually be anxiety. Is it that your kid had a doctor's appointment and they didn't get back to school? Like, those are all different solutions. So I was curious, Chris, have you been able, and this may be not just EDIA, but any kind of AI, this is where maybe AI could help us more easily analyze why kids are missing school, so then we can come up with solutions that either are benefit an individual kid or ideal solutions that maybe affect a whole bunch of kids because you actually have this same problem affecting a lot of kids. And I'm wondering if, Chris, you've been able to do that in Farmington.
Yeah, John, I might just mention the AI analyst tool is something that we have started to use within EDIA. The AI analyst can to AI pulling out those messages, right, and finding keywords or and whatnot. Like this morning, I typed in what were our top 5 causes of absenteeism. I could type in there like how many times is a stomach ache mentioned in these messages, and it would populate that for me pretty quickly. So the tools are coming, right? And we just have access to that now. And yeah, it's a good point, right? It's information is great, but if you don't really know what it's saying, it's not doing a lot for you. Like in our attendance codes in Power School. This way I can say of my parent verifieds, how many were at a doctor, how many were this, and it will populate that info for me. So it's a great question. It's something that's super useful to be able to do.
And Chris, I'd just be curious, what have you seen as the biggest common barriers that the kids in your community are facing?
What pops up a lot of times is transportation, health. It comes up as one. It is probably the top two.
But I think what's interesting though is, a lot of times, Eddie, what you're saying is that, you dig into an individual student and it becomes more nuanced and more nuanced. And your point about they're out sick, but it's a stomach ache, but actually they're anxious. It all becomes breadcrumbs that the team can then go and investigate into. I'll remember kind of forever. I think right when we launched with Farmington, there was a student who we saw was just missing a ton of class, but who would always show up for 2 periods. And they weren't next to each other. They were like third period and fifth period, second period and fifth period, something like that. And you could see it. What they were skipping everything. They were skipping math, English, Spanish, all the classes except these two. And when you looked at it, it was computers and computer science, where like there's something like that were the two courses. And it's just like, whoa, that's super interesting, right? They just didn't want to be in those other classes. And so there, you can look, so every student has these, something is causing them not to be there. And absolutely, transportation. It's such a big district, like Farmington. It can, I mean, some of your families live a far away from the school, and they need a car. And Chris and I were talking about the weather here out in Mexico right now. It's like raining, sideways, and it's like giant. It's like it can genuinely be hard sometimes to get to school. But yeah, these things can, you just keep on unpacking it, unlocking it, in at the high level or at a student level, and you get all these powerful insights you can go take action
Well,
on.
and Joe, let me just put out that the other way is if you try to go from an asset point. So I know that kid always comes to these computer science. Well, then the person working with them may talk to him about, well, why do you have to show up to math if you like that? What's the connection to their love of computer science and showing up to their other classes? The other possibility is a lot of times you see kids will come up and it's because there's a particular teacher who knows how to really connect to kids. Or maybe you see the data on a particular school and they have better ways. And I'd be curious, Chris, like even I bet there are some schools that are better at using media than others. And then what do you know about that? Because then that teaches you practices that you actually want to have other people adopting. So how can you use this to also build upon assets?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of my schools that I work with closely, that probably saw some of their larger gains this year was definitely the one that took on the idea of assigning champions. It's something you do in EDIA, right? A kid gets flagged, you can assign a student a champion, and that could be a counselor, social worker, a teacher that connects with them well. And then it's flagging that person to connect with that individual. And so the school that really, I mean, that secretary kept calling me every day. Can you add this person as a champion? Can you add this person as a champion? I'm like, yep, sure can. Let's do that. It's no surprise that they dropped their absentee rate just as much, or anybody that of the schools this year. Almost 10% drop in chronic absentee rate at that school when they started assigning champions, and then they could bring it up in their PLCs, right? Like it would populate, send it to the PLC leader. Hey, we need to call this child's parents this week and connect, right? Because the lady in our secretary said, this is what's going on. They send them the message that they have, and they're like, okay, let's call her up. Let's get the parent here. Let's see what we can do for him. And so, yeah, that was definitely something that I saw in schools that really utilized the platform to engage families personally, saw the biggest gains.
Yeah. That's wonderful. I mean, it's wild to think that we've gone from we know this kid's absent to we can tell what classes that they're passionate about and identifying who their favorite teacher is to connect as that champion. It reminds me back to the idea you were sharing earlier, Hedy, of greeting kids at the door. Is building that connection is so important. And it's really, this is AI, it's technology, but it's allowing some really human work from that.
Well, it makes me wonder, one of the things we have this 50% challenge, and New Mexico is part of that. So that's fabulous as a state department. But we talk about five possible routes to getting to a reduction: family engagement, student connectedness, health, well-being, and safety, access to learning. So you can have the transportation, the technology, but also relevant, engaging learning. And I actually think some of EDIA can help you understand possibly even how much you're engaging in any one or all of these routes. And I think about the student connectedness one, and this is, Chris, inspired by your example. But kids are connected when they feel that there's an adult that they can trust in the building, that they're connected to other peers, that they feel a sense of belonging, and that they are engaged in something meaningful. And you could imagine where you can use this to say, well, how many of my kids have these four things? Is there an adult? Is there a kid? Are they engaged in something? And though there might be ways, and also if you combine that with sometimes survey information, I mean, I think this is where, whether it's EDIA or other technology, we have a lot of information. We don't know how to use that information and make meaning out of it. So we make sure that the kids have the things they need to succeed in school.
Yeah. Yeah, I fully agree there. At the end of the day, it's like, and he just articulated them, the reasons why kids come to school or don't. And, in a sense too, whether ED or something else, like there is just a lot of work that goes into operating a school. There's just a lot, like hundreds or thousands of kids to take care of, and the operations and logistics of it. And that at the end of the day, that stuff gets in the way of what's really important, which is building those connections with students, understand what's going on, being there, asking these questions, being supportive, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, as a technologist, really we always aspire to, you know, help do that, help get, do the sort of the logistics, the operational work so that people can do the high impact people things. And I remember, was it with Farmington with San Bernardino, we work with them, and we had a check-in call, and one of their staff said, I've never seen our staff so happy. They just came back. They got freed up, and they just came back from, they were giving out attendance awards, going to elementary schools, giving attendance awards to kids who were kind of absent the year prior, and the kids' faces were lit up, and they were just like beaming, and it's like, that's the type of work we want to free everyone up to go do. But you can't do that if you're mired in, like your point, Hedy, data analysis, or taking a doctor's note and filing it and then typing it into Power School, or calling 70 families and going to their voicemail because you don't have a better system. Like that stuff just shouldn't be taking up anyone's time, right?
Yeah. And Dr. Jones, are those the type of time shifts you've seen in your team's day as that's been freed up?
Yeah, definitely. That's like Joe was saying, it's the ability to go do the fun stuff, the personal stuff with kids, right? And that's something we've been pushing in our schools around our New Mexico, like our Be Here days and stuff, and celebrating attendance, celebrating improved attendance. And this allows us to kind of alleviate some of the behind the scenes work to really focus on those moments with kids and stuff. And that's what's fun, right? That's what makes teachers want to go to school every day, and that's what makes kids want to go to school every day is the good stuff. So
Yeah, that's wonderful. Um, so you're getting insights, freeing up folks' time, and going from that. Hedy, I wonder too, as we free up that time, you talked about those barriers. Could you speak a little bit more about those five kind of barriers we see as we push to that 50% goal for reduction for students experiencing chronic absence?
Well, it's interesting. So the five strategies, they're strategies, but they do reflect barriers.
Yeah.
So family engagement is also because we don't think families are being engaged. One of the issues is I think that families may not fully understand what's being taught in school, so that when kids miss school, they realize why that's a problem. I don't think families respond that well to, oh, you should just show up to school because that's what you're supposed to. But if you say, hey, Joe, your kid missed school, and when they miss school, these are all the things they missed out on. These are the opportunities to development. And actually, I can see it now connected into what they can't figure out about algebra or whatever it is. That then helps families understand. But we also need things like family engagement, like when does school start? Because it starts a different day every place. When are the, days that vacation really is versus you taking your own self. So those are all parts of family engagement. I mentioned the student and connectedness, health, well-being, and safety, making sure that and you'd want to make it easy. If we know more that post-pandemic, school climate matters more than ever. If kids are feeling bullied, if kids are not feeling safe in school, if families aren't feeling, or that the route to school isn't safe, that's really tough to get there. Then the access to learning, whether that's transportation or whether that's the digital connections that you still need because that's where your all homework, happens. Or whether you have relevant, engaging learning, which, one of the things that we're really seeing these days is we've actually seen some decreases in the levels of chronic absence in the early grades, which is great. It's still not back to the pre-pandemic, but it's much better than it was 3 years ago. We are not seeing the same kind of decreases generally in the high school grades. High school, like senior level, seniors being chronically absent is a huge issue and challenge. And I think that's partly because kids aren't quite sure what's the point of school right now? Is that going to get me a better job? Is it connected? What are the skills? And so we have to help make sure that kids feel that school's the place that they're going to learn and they're going to gain something. And so I think those strategies reflect barriers, which it's actually worth thinking about. What are all the ways, including through technology and AI communications, we can better unpack what's not in place about those strategies and what are assets that we have in place that we could build upon that could get kids to school.
Wonderful, wonderful. So it's about connecting kids to the resources. A lot of times school districts have resources in place, but it's just we need the visualization to know which issue to focus on. Um, Dr. Jones, are there any issues that came up for Farmington that surprised you when you got the insight?
Um, yeah, I would say surprising, a lot of surprises around just like instability with transportation, things like that. Even students being evicted, right? I mean, that's real life that happens, and the fact that families would share that on a text message was really compelling. That maybe wouldn't have gotten otherwise verbally, in a voicemail. But to be able to uncover that and then get students to our resources, right? So we have a liaison in our district that works with the community to make sure students have housing. We have a Native American youth advisor that can support our families in making sure they have the resources at home, basic needs met, so that they can come to school. That we otherwise may not have seen. And so, yeah, they're definitely surprising some of the stuff that'll come through a text message.
Yeah.
Actually, I want to add to that because that was something we were not, when we pioneered this entire AI communication with families. And we were when we first began, we were unsure if families would be open to that. We all use ChatGPT, but would you be open to the AI reaching out and asking, what's going on? And and this is such a sensitive thing for a lot of families. Like, if your student's not coming to school, as a parent, like, you feel a lot of complex emotions about what's going on. Like, and it can be for all these reasons. Maybe it's, they're in kindergarten, but you've got to go to work, and you told the brother, your son to take, all these things can happen. You feel like guilty, sometimes, maybe the kid doesn't like going to school, and you feel like that's something's going on there, or there can be issues between a teacher and a student, and all these things can happen. And we were shocked when, and like Chris said, when we began, our solution, just how actually open and comfortable parents were talking to the AI. And I still like kind of think about that a lot. And I think in some ways it's non-judgmental, that the AI is neutral. It's never going to admonish the parent. Like, oh, your son's in the cafe, they're not in class. Like, bad. That's, it's never anything like that. It's just really trying to understand why the student's not showing up. And so to Chris's point, I mean, we got evicted, or parent, one parent very memorably said, my daughter's been having a hard time. We just moved into the state, and girls in 10th grade can be really mean. And it's like, wow, that was something that immediately we flagged to the Farmington team. And it's like, that's their, she's saying her kid's getting picked on and having a hard time making friends. And it's like, let's uncover that. That's an opportunity the school can go and support. And the schools have many schools have so many resources. And, if you can help match and identify it, that's so high leverage.
Joe, if families are sharing really sensitive information, how do you ensure protections about that information, both in terms of who it's shared, but even, I mean, right now, all of us are worried, everything's going on to the cloud, and who's going to use the information for not such positive reasons. I'm curious if you could speak to what do you need to do I do worry there are some abuses that AI can engage in, even though I think there are a lot of benefits to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very, very important. So, and kind of we'll walk through the whole thing, but first, EDS supports over 1 million students across 300 plus districts. We've been through every possible security audit I know of, including in New York City. It took us a year plus to go through their entire process. So, it's very, very, very well vetted, and kind of very kind of well documented, SOC to every kind of thing on a security standpoint, just kind of a technical security
But
standpoint.
so people can't get your data, in other words.
Exactly. The data is not going to be hacked or anything, internal processes we all do. But then I think a lot of it is also about and then even kind of further than that, so then the AI, what AI do you use? The AI, the ED uses, it's all in the US. It's all on the same security that the government uses for their classified things. It's all encrypted. And then ultimately the districts own the data, not EDIA. And so if a district says, look, we want to delete everything, every message, or we're no longer using EDIA, or whatever the case might be, great, and it gets fully deleted. But so that's more on the technical standpoint. I think though on the product standpoint matters just as much. There are other questions too in the chat about who can access it, can teachers access it, and so on. And we've been very, very thoughtful about the permissions and the roles, and who can see these conversations and what gets written back to the SIS. EDIA, we connect automatically to the student information system, whether it's PowerSchool or Synergy or Infinite Campus or any of these things. But we don't write back we update the codes correctly. We kind of add the appropriate little note about why that was changed, but we don't share sensitive information back to the SIS where a lot of people could see it. So like if there's like I'll give you a really concrete example. If a student's having seizures, epileptic seizures, that may be a very valid health reason. EDIA knows that's a health reason. We have a note from the doctor that's been processed by the system. But when we go write that as a note to the SIS, we will put medical, and we'll say doctor verified or whatever doctor's note received. But we're not going to say the student's having seizures and this happened or whatever the case might be in the SIS, because a lot of people could view that data and that would violate that student's privacy. And so there's all these things like that have been really deliberate, really thoughtful choices to make sure that you have a functional, powerful system, but not in the way the district wants it to. to be. And Chris, you can probably speak to about some of the things too, where you all set up different roles and different stuff, and how you set things up too at the district.
Correct. So just like we would in our SIS, different roles have different access, right? And so in EDIA, we set up different roles. There's admin roles. When they request access, I can click on which schools those people can see. There's, champion role that can't see what the admin's seeing, that type of thing. And again, like you said, it doesn't write back to Power School like the whole message, just the what's necessary, right? And so then when it goes to Power School, we have our own parameters within our SIS that only those that should have access to those types of notes have access to that, right? So it's the admin, the teacher record, that type of stuff. So there's multiple controls along the way that can be set to prevent that, because that's, we hear it all the time, different breaches and things like that. We want to make sure we protect our families. So yeah, we definitely set parameters along the way.
Yeah. And that follows on great. Mary Gomez had a question in the chat, which Joe, you may have been referencing, of just asking about how that data goes from EDIA to Power School or to the student information system. So, um, and then we had some questions about how EDIA recommends interventions for students. And so, Dr. Jones, you've seen those, I'm sure, as you are signing champions and going through that, or Joe, you could speak to how we recommend those interventions.
Yeah, Joe, you want to take it there? I've seen them. I've worked with schools like you can click on it for intervention, provide suggested interventions. You could probably speak a little bit more to how all that works as far as the tech side, but yeah, it's a great feature for us.
Well, I think, yeah, and even more broadly, the philosophy, like Hedy's been saying too the whole time, like absences have reasons for them, and root causes. And the messaging part's just the first part. It changes the culture, and you find out why the kid's not showing up for school. But then that's only the first half. The second half is then to go do something about it, which we kind of call an intervention at media. And that's really where you have an opportunity as a campus or a district to provide that coordinated support, the longer term tracking, and really whatever resource the district has, or like some districts do attendance contracts with the parents, some have attendance mentors, so I mean the kind of transportation supports. I mean there can be such a wide variety, in attendance works. I'll just give them a plug. They're doing such a good job documenting all the different things and suggestions and what works, what doesn't. And there can be these big differences of good practices versus bad. And so really the interventions part of media, we try to really like take the best practices of what's out there, the research that's out there, and what kind of what works, and make that easy for district staff, campus staff to actually go implement. And so like Chris is saying, it's super straightforward. You'll see a student's missed a lot of days of school, or you'll see these reasons for why kids have missed school. The AI will actually suggest students for intervention well before they get to chronic absenteeism. Kind of levels. And then the staff can review and decide, maybe not yet, or maybe we should go talk to the family. We should investigate what's going on, talk to the student, talk to the teacher. And then after that, they go and create an intervention and choose from these different templates. And, it works well. There's certainly more and more that can be done, but it becomes effective. Yeah.
Joe, is there in EDIA a standard set of interventions, and you could do tier one, tier two, tier three, and then a district tailors it to their own? How does that work?
Yeah, we've provided about 50 evidence-based templates across not just attendance, across everything, but a lot being attendance-based, that are all evidence-backed, kind of proven effective. And then those, then the district, we provide that as out of the box templates for the district. And then the district can go and actually modify or say, we don't use that. We don't have attendance contracts. We don't believe in that, whatever the case. And so they can remove that intervention from their system. So it can't be assigned, or they could modify and say, well, actually we call ours the Raptor, the Eagle mentorship program. So, okay, we're going to change it to Eagle mentorship program, and they can kind of make it their own. So I'd say it's a starting point for best practices, but really the districts know and schools know, what works there, and what resources they have, and can really make it their own.
And folks, we are coming up on time. I think we've had a wonderful conversation today. We're going to have some continued conversations in the future. Thank you to everyone joining us to listen in with Hedy Chang and Chris Jones and Joe Filio about how Farmington has moved the needle on chronic absenteeism. And hopefully you've gained some great ideas about things that you can bring back to your districts and your schools as well. I do want to share here, if you are interested in scheduling a demo or learning more about ED attendance for your district or hearing about our future webinars, you can access us through this QR code here as well. And we'll send follow-up emails to those that attended and registered. But thank you, Dr. Jones. Thank you, Hedy. Thank you, Joe, for joining us today and for sharing your insights and your experiences. I know I certainly learned a lot, and I hope all of our attendees did as well.
So thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Thank you. Pleasure to join.